So I spent a week playing Lost Ark. Here's what I liked, what I didn't like, and what I'm keeping my eye on. Full disclaimer, I have never played Lost Ark at all. I have seen clips of it, I've been shown some pretty cool things. I've had friends that are really excited to play Lost Ark who were playing on the Russian servers and really wanted me to play, and I really just never got into it. Now, from what I understand from the community, apparently Lost Ark has had other iterations of the game that haven't done too well. However, after it being reiterated, I believe on the third try, it is turned into a game that a lot of people really like. At the time of recording this, it's been about a week since the closed beta test that they had, and I feel like this is probably the best time to go ahead and give my thoughts after I've let them kind of sit in the honeymoon period of playing the beta is finally over. That, and I wanted to give myself some time to kind of look around, see what people say about the game, how they're feeling, and sometimes those ideas kind of make me remember certain things that I might have kind of pushed out of my head. That way I can kind of give it an honest, I don't say review because I feel like review is not exactly the right word, but honest thoughts on the game overall. So if you've never played Lost Ark is a top-down ARPG. So it's action RPG, like action-based. Click to move, which might be a little put off for some people. Very similar to your Diablos, Path of Exile, so on and so forth. But very high on the fantasy, action, and almost in a sense, almost anime-esque gameplay that you see, or I can't even say gameplay, but cutscenes that you will see from the game itself. And as I'm sure you realize by this intro, when I went to sit down to actually talk about Lost Ark, I went through a lot of stuff. I actually wrote up an entire script, and I read through the script, and I read through it again, and I read through it again, and I hated it. So I tossed it out, went downstairs, got a brownie, got some milk, came back upstairs, enjoyed it, watched a YouTube video, and thought, you know what? We're just going to go ahead and go with this one off the dome. I'm going to give you guys my honest thoughts as someone who just played and enjoyed a game, and the things that I personally am maybe a little concerned on, maybe want to make sure that don't happen in this version of the game itself, and I'm looking forward to. So let's start things off fairly simple. The game is visually amazing. It looks beautiful. The characters look super awesome. The armors look amazing, even while leveling, going through the game itself. The enemies look really cool. Like, the game itself visually looks absolutely amazing, and it ran like a dream. Granted, I was running it on my computer. It does have relatively high specs, but realistically, the only time I dealt with lag was loading into a new zone and then just trying to move immediately when loading into a new zone, like immediately just start running forward. There was a little bit of like a lag or a pullback, but outside of that, really, I didn't deal with too much of any issues whatsoever while playing. The play experience overall was actually really cool. Had a great story for the game itself, something I could feel really immersed into. I am someone who enjoyed Diablo 2 and Diablo 3, and I remember playing Diablo 3, I really wasn't feeling that immersed in its story whatsoever, and coming from someone who enjoyed Diablo 2 storyline, Diablo 3 really didn't pull me in or hook me at all, where playing Lost Ark, I don't want to fanboy, but honestly, the story has felt like any other game of its type has tried to push for. Like, storyline wise, it has been really impactful. The characters are memorable, and it's just been a fun time all around. Like, usually in MMOs, I don't really pay that much attention to the story the first time. I have to like get hooked into the world or really like what I'm doing to then go back and watch the story. But this time around, I almost made myself forced to sit down and watch the story because it really did hook me in, and I didn't want to skip over it in fear of missing out on something that was going to be super awesome. Gameplay wise, the game was fairly seamless to get into. If you've ever played any other top-down RPGs, you're pretty used to the formula by now. It's not anything too crazy over the top or difficult to get used to at all. Leveling felt pretty cool. The quests didn't seem too over the top or annoying. Everything kind of just seemed to flow together very well, which isn't easy to do in an MMO. Usually things feel like disjointed or spread apart or anything along those lines. A lot of quests felt like if you were going to be in this area, here's some side quests that are going to be alongside what you're doing anyway. You very rarely felt like you were pulled away from like what you were doing to go do a side quest. A lot of it was just kind of along the way, which is a good way to do side quests in an MMO. Now, part of my feelings on gameplay is also going to stem from the class that I chose. Now, those who watch the stream know that I kind of flip-flopped a little bit trying to decide what I wanted to play, and I think ultimately I still don't know what I'm going to play on launch. I have an idea between two classes, but I kind of flip-flop between the Devil Hunter, or Deadeye as it's called on the US servers, and the Striker. Striker more so because it fit, the melee type playstyle that I enjoyed, with shorter cooldowns, just high action hits. but Devil Hunter or Deadeye, because it fit more of the character aesthetic that I liked. The armor was really, really cool. A lot of the weapons were super dope. And it was high damage as well as high difficulty, which does appeal to me as a player, something I kind of enjoy. But it wasn't exactly the perfect setup for me, so it was kind of like a toss-up back and forth. Occasionally, I would kind of like, go monkey brain and like just pause buffer for a second before I can even remember what I was supposed to be doing. So it is going to mess around with how I feel about the gameplay overall, but gameplay realistically was actually pretty smooth. It took me a while to kind of get certain things going, but the systems that they used for leveling up skills, the tripods and all those sorts of things were actually pretty awesome, pretty intuitive, fairly easy to understand and learn. There was a little bit of a learning curve, but a lot of great information out there. Other content creators, as well as, other sites, things of that sort, made things pretty easy to understand and learn about fairly quickly. You're also able to level and unlevel skills freely, pretty basically, as long as the skill isn't on cooldown. And I think you could actually do it in combat, to be perfectly honest. As long as the skill wasn't on cooldown, it should have been an issue, but I don't think I ever tried doing it in combat. Unfortunately, the beta's down, so I couldn't tell you for sure. But it was pretty easy to just test things out, and if you didn't like it, you could change it up. And these different skills had milestones that you would get to where it would drastically change the skill depending upon how many points you put into it. And they call it the tripod system, where if you got up to enough skill points, I believe it was like from 1 to level 10 at levels, I want to say it was level 4, 7, and 10, you got kind of worked like a capstone skill in a sense, where it would change your skill, whether it would add something to it, change how it worked, add an elemental effect, something along those lines. They would add those to the skills, which would drastically change how you would use them, which for gameplay, it was actually pretty cool. Make tons and tons of different builds, test things out. And before I forget, you were even able to test things out in like a training area. They had like a specialized training area where you could summon enemies and test out if your skills were going to work well. I didn't get to do a whole lot with that because I didn't push really hardcore in endgame. I just kind of played through the game and enjoyed it, like, at a casual pace. But overall, as far as skills go in the game, builds are going to be very fun to test out and mess around with. As someone who does like to make builds in games, I think it's gonna be super cool, and they weren't difficult to do. When I say difficult, I mean they didn't make it difficult on you. There wasn't like a currency involved. You could reset your skills freely and test things out without having to worry about too much, which is, in my opinion, very important and super cool. Keep in mind, all of this is from a free to play game. So the game is completely free. You don't have to pay anything for it once it comes out. Usually it's very common for free-to-play games to put some form of currency that you either have to purchase with real money, or that you only get very sparingly to reset skills and test out class builds. It's kind of a way they tend to make money. But we'll talk about the whole money aspect and the cash shop thing in just a little bit. So around level 26, there was a major point in the story. Some really cool stuff happened, but part of the cool things that happen with your first character, you end up getting a player house. So that talks more about player housing. Player housing is an instance area where it's basically like an island. It's kind of cool, but you have a personalized house that you can build up, a like courtyard and stuff like that. You can put things out in, and kind of like a whole little mini civilization in a sense to yourself. You have traders that you can trade with. You make and build things for your island as well as for yourself personally. There's some crafting that's involved. There's like if you ever played World of Warcraft, where they have the command tables, it's very similar to that, or the mission tables where you send out your scouts on missions. They bring back currencies, things of that sort. So all those things are actually pretty cool. It's pretty fun to get into, and it's available to everyone. Everyone can set up different ones, and you can visit your friends. So that was super cool. Apparently you can also leave your alt characters in there, like extra characters you have, you can leave them in there and they level on their own, like they have passive experience. So that's pretty dope. But I didn't really get too far into that, so I can't talk about that too much. All in all, it felt very mobile gamey, but like in a good way. Sometimes there's a lot of mobile gamey things that can happen in a game that you really don't want to see. This is kind of one of those ones that's kind of fun just to like hang around in, mess around with occasionally. Maybe if you don't have a lot of time, log in, take care of, and log out. It was just a cool thing to see them add, and it was nice to see that it didn't feel very limiting. There was a lot of things to do with it. Since I mentioned crafting, I guess I could talk about gathering as well. Gathering in the game wasn't too cumbersome. They made it fairly simple. It was mostly like just point and click, pull up some stuff. The fishing felt very Monster Hunter-esque, where it's just toss out the bobber, wait for it to fall down, and then, of course, wait for the fish to grab it, pull it up. Very simple. It seems like there was some gathering levels, so different things you could gather, different ways of gathering, so on and so forth. There were upgraded gathering tools, so I'm sure that'll get more in depth as we go further on into endgame. And of course, with these sorts of things, these life skills, usually if people don't want to do them, it's going to be useful to take these materials and sell them. So I'm sure it'll be very useful on the player shop that's available to players at the player marketplace, basically. So Gathering, again, a plus. I come from Final Fantasy 14, where Gathering is very much more in depth than most MMOs go, so it's not going to be I'm not going to be as blown away by Gathering in most games, just because it's not at the level that 14 does. Even 14 nowadays is a little bit more dumbed down, because it used to be a little bit kind of crazy with theirs. But realistically speaking, Gathering in the game is good. It's Gathering, and it gets done. It's not too cumbersome and too annoying, or too out of the way. So it gets a plus from me. So up to this point, I've talked about a lot of things that I really, really like about the game itself. And I kind of want to transition a little bit to things that I'm not super happy with while playing through the game. And I'm sure some of you, plenty of you guys have heard these if you've watched the stream itself. And I kind of want to, give a little bit of background to these sorts of things too. So Lost Ark character design is really, really, really good. If you're unaware of how the game works, they have class archetypes or classes in general, and I guess they have like professions, or individual professions like have different branches they can go down. You've got the warrior, you have the martial artist, you have the gunner, the what's the last one? The assassin, and the mage. And then amongst those, you have individual like specs they can go to. The way it's kind of branched at the moment, they are gender locked, meaning that the individual specs are gender locked to specific gender. For example, there are 3 male warriors. However, there are only 2 female mages. At least in the version that we're getting. Of course, keep in mind that the version that the Russian servers as well as the Japanese servers and them, they have all of the different classes that are available in the game. So they have up to 20 specs that are available. We only have 15, I believe, that we're getting at the start. So yeah, that is what it is. One thing I will commend them for is none of the character classes seem to have the same animations for their skills. A lot of them are very, very different. Now, there's an asterisk, because the classes that are mirrors, in my opinion, I say mirrors specifically, but they're very, very close with the gender swap versions. Basically, where you have something like the Deadeye, you also have, I believe they're called the Gunner. I don't remember exactly what they were called, but the female version of the Deadeye. All of her skills were very, 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 very similar to the Deadeye. It's just a different way of playing them slightly. The same thing was with the martial artist, and then of course, the striker. And then the female version of the striker itself, I think it was the war dancer. A lot of their skills were very, very similar. However, they played differently. So it's one of those situations where I can commend them for the amount of time they put into making the characters and making all these different skills. But it was a little bit of a cheap out by making a lot of these skills mostly the same when you're looking at the gender, the gender swapped characters. Gender mirror more than gender swap, but you kind of get the idea. Now, I started with that specifically because I wanted to say what I'm not a huge fan of is the classes they decided to push out first. Now, it's obvious that they take each individual spec for these classes. I'm going to call them specs. I'm not sure if that's the exact name for them. I just come from a bunch of different MMOs, and that's the first thing I think about. But the classes they decided to make and these specs they decided to make doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. The reason for that is they've obviously shown they can put in the development and the time into making these very, very in-depth, very specific characters with different animations. So why do we have 4 male warriors and 4 female mages? It doesn't make sense to me. There should be some form of a balance that's a little bit better overall, because not everyone that likes playing the warrior archetype wants to be a big, bulky dude. Some people like big, bulky chicks, or maybe not as big and bulky, maybe a little bit thinner, maybe a bit thinner, who knows? Like myself personally, I'm very much a fan of the assassin, but I personally don't really like playing female characters. It has nothing to do with disliking female characters in general. It has everything to do with I definitely take myself into a fantasy game like these sorts of things, so I can't take myself into a character that I don't see myself in, and it makes it very, very difficult for me to have a lot of fun with that game in those situations. That's a lot of why I played the flip-flop between Deadeye and Striker, because they had like individual pieces of things that I liked, but it wasn't the whole thing altogether. Now, some would say that, maybe you should push outside of your shell, so on and so forth, but it's a video game. I should be able to play what I like to play. And now granted, I'm suspecting in the future they plan on having these alternate versions for every character, because funny enough, the 3 things that they're missing are a male Sin, a male mage, and a female warrior. And if you look at the character creation page, it has 3 open slots, which would fit those 3 archetypes, which would give it 1 of every side. So I'm pretty sure they plan on doing something like that. But the fact that they have chosen to go the route of making so many of one archetype and then not of the other just kind of throws me off. Again, definitely credit them for the characters they made, because they all are very different. They're very in depth. But I mean, like, you look at something like the male striker versus the female war dancer, and you look at how similar they are, and you're like, you know what, they definitely could have done this for some other classes, or even maybe just made some other mirrors that they didn't have to make so drastically different. They could have made something similar and people would have been happy with. I think it would have been a great way of going about it. I'm not saying that they've done a terrible job of what they've done so far, but I personally would have preferred more variety with gender, in my opinion, especially now in today's day and age where we have such like a fluidity that's involved in a lot of games. That would have felt a lot better personally for me. Now, granted, I'm saying this is someone who didn't have a class that he really kind of connected with. If there was a male sin, I probably wouldn't have cared about this as much. That's why it's gonna be different for everyone. It's not a situation that's gonna be the same for everyone across the board. I just wanted to give you guys my 2 cents on the matter itself. But I kind of wish they put that type of effort into making more, because they could make some pretty cool freaking stuff. A male sin would be dope. I still don't know how we don't have a male mage of any sort and a female warrior. Like, dude, imagine a hammer waifu. That's all I'm saying. Anyway, that's what I've said about classes itself. Now I kind of move on to something that I'm kind of keeping an eye on. I'm not exactly upset about it just yet. At the same time, I'm not completely letting them pass on this one. Now, this last one has to do more with the cash shop. And of course, as everyone asks, is the game pay to win, so on and so forth. Now, the phrase pay to win has a lot to do with the individual, in my opinion. It's very specific. But I'm going to go ahead and be honest with you guys. In the beta, yes, technically it was kind of pay to win. And let me go ahead and explain what I mean by that. Well, I played the beta. They provided about 40,000 of the currency crystals that were available. They allowed people to buy those whatever they wanted. One of the things that was in the player shop that was available for purchase was upgrade stones. They were upgrade items that were used for upgrading your end game gear, meaning that you could take all those crystals, purchase a ton of end game upgrade gear, spend about 30 minutes just upgrading your gear when you hit level 50 and get jumped way ahead. I believe someone did a video talking about this. If I remember, I'll leave it in the video description. I can't remember off the top of my head right now, but they showed how the first day of the beta, you could get from base gear to item level, I think 500 immediately. And I think base item level was about 350 or something along those lines. And that was without even leaving the town. You barely had to do anything. You could get, you actually would jump up to nearly, I want to say like 400 just from doing like maybe 2 or 3 different things and then just buying a bunch of things out of the cash shop. It was absolutely crazy. Now, most people who played Lost Ark now will tell you that the amount of money you would have to spend to be able to do this in other versions of the game would be absolutely insane. Players really don't need to do this sort of thing. They give you tons of materials in game, so on and so forth, to be able to have your character. They've been very generous, so on, and all those sorts of things are things you're going to hear from players who've been playing the game itself. Now, there is a counter retort to this. The counter retort is that it doesn't matter if they give you these items. If you're able to just purchase them, players are going to purchase them. People are going to just swipe the credit card to get that much more power faster than you. And in today's day and age where MMOs have a lot to do with cutting edge content completion as quickly as possible, when you have a mechanic like being able to purchase things off of the player shop immediately without having to do anything, and then also have access to those things that you're able to then just, of course, go through and run through that content as well. Those two things together will give the player quite a bit of an edge. The amount of money spent honestly doesn't really matter that much. Granted, it matters to the individual spending the money, but in the grand scheme of the game itself, it does cause a bit of a problem there. Now, you're probably thinking, why aren't you up in arms about this? You just said this is not something that you're super upset about. You're keeping your eye on it. Well, I can't remember exactly where it's at, and I'm gonna have to find the article for this specifically. But Amazon did mention that the player shop currently that we're seeing in beta does have some of the mechanics of the previous versions of the servers that are on other servers like RU, so on and so forth, that are available on those servers that will not be in this version of the game. They're asking for feedback about it. They're saying that some of those versions or some of those things from the cash shop are still in there. We're assuming we're talking about the crystals, so on and so forth. They don't mention it specifically, which is why I'm just keeping my eye on it. But they talk about those things not being in the cash shop or that they're only there for the beta. They're kind of vague on it specifically, which allows them to decide that, oh, it should be there or it shouldn't be there, depending upon what players say. But this is where people should be vocal about this sort of thing. The reality of the situation is that if players are going to be able to take the amount of currency that you provide them for free and then pay a ton of money to get more currency to push themselves ahead of other players, that is when you get to that line where players start to draw where is a game pay to win or not. Now, is it going to personally hurt your experience playing the game as a casual player and enjoying it? No. It's not a situation, it seems honestly from what I've played, from what I've looked up, from what I've checked out all the other servers or whatever, if you just play the game, you're just enjoying the game itself at a casual rate, then honestly they give you everything you need. You'll upgrade your gear, you'll take care of most of what you have to take care of in the first place. Maybe you'll have an alt or two that'll help funnel some gear over to your main character or some currency and make life a little bit easier for you. But realistically, no, you're not hard capped by your lack of being able to pay for the game itself. However, if the game remains in the state that it did during the beta, if you're someone that's trying to push end game content, that's someone that's trying to make sure that they're at the cutting edge, the best of the best, they absolutely can be as soon as possible, do things before anyone else gets a chance to do them the best they possibly can, make it so their skill does shine, as well as, of course, the amount they plan on grinding something, then yeah, it does look kind of pay to win right now at the moment, and it doesn't look good. It's not a great look for it overall, and as a player who wants the game to succeed, these are not good things for the game overall. You don't want to see these sorts of things in the game. You want them to be gone. Yes, the game is free to play. Yes, they have a lot of great things in there, and they give you plenty of currency. But it's still going to hurt the game overall by having these mechanics in there. And a lot of people who are outspoken about it, there have been streamers who've been very outspoken about it, where players just like, oh my God, it costs this much. Why would you do it? Well, because they can. That's the reality of the situation, is not everyone is going to come off the same. You're not going to be at the same level. It's like trying to PvP with, it's like gear-based PvP, honestly. That happens in a lot of other games, right? When you jump into the PvP, you feel like you're kind of at a disadvantage to someone else who's been there the entire time. Now imagine if they could have just paid for all the gear that they have and you get the gear over time. That's going to feel really unfair to you, but to them it's going to be perfectly fine because they have tons and tons of gear and they're smashing you with it. It doesn't feel good. It feels pretty terrible whenever you feel like you're at a disadvantage. Even if you may not be at a disadvantage, if you feel like you're at a disadvantage, it does feel terrible, and it does impact the game negatively. So I urge you, if you're someone who's enjoying Lost Ark, if you've played the game itself, I do believe you should provide your feedback. I don't think the game needs these sorts of things in the first place. They have a great job. They've done a great job with their cash shop. There's plenty of fantastic outfits. They can put more money into making those amazing looking outfits and people will buy them. Trust me when I say people will spend more money on fashion than they will on anything else. Now, with all that being said, at the end of the day, I do believe you should give Lost Ark a chance. It's going to be a free-to-play game. You've got nothing to lose but your own time. Maybe a bit of sanity, depending upon who you ask. And honestly, just playing through the game casually and trying to enjoy it for what it is, it was a great experience. Even playing with your friends, just going through the game itself, you could look at it almost like a co-op playthrough of a video game. It's actually really, really cool. There's plenty of stuff to do, plenty of things to get into. But like I mentioned earlier, we do have to keep our eye on certain things that might not be too great for the game. Here's hoping that Amazon does a decent job with it. We'll have to see how things look. And yeah, I'm definitely excited to play the game when it comes out in March. I'm not sure exactly when. I think they said it's supposed to be coming out in spring. Everyone keeps saying March. So our guesses are going to be end of March. We'll have to see how that works out. But hopefully I'll see you guys there. If you guys have any other questions, feel free to toss them into the comments. Like I said, we're keeping our eye on this one. I'm not 100% sure yet, but I'm high hopes. I'm hoping to see some pretty cool stuff because honestly, this game looks amazing and its potential is really, really, really high. Toss your feelings into the comments. Be civil to one another. That's all I ask. And I'll see all of you in... I'm trying to think of what the name of that world is, but honestly, I don't know, man. I can only think of the half demon, half priest dude who was just so super sick in the story. Guys, watch. At least check out. Just at least play Lost Ark for the story. The story is actually really, really dope. All right, guys, I'm out of here. I've rambled on long enough. Later.